So, benchmark workouts, another way I would just say it is repeat workouts. Repeat workouts can be a great way to assess that everything you're doing is moving in the right direction. It's like testing, you go to school, you take tests, you want to make sure that the classes you're attending every day are actually yielding the result that you hope that they are. Truth be told, there's no rules. You could identify your own benchmarks and make anything in the world that you wanted to. You could create a workout today, tomorrow, give it a name, don't give it a name, do whatever you want and make that a benchmark workout. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think a benchmark workout has to have a name. A benchmark workout could also be just something which makes multiple appearances, for example. A 5x5 back squat day is most certainly a benchmark of strength, but it doesn't have a name, at all. And it doesn't have any crazy fanfare and excitement associated with it. 7x1 deadlift is a benchmark. 5K run is a benchmark. There's plenty of benchmarks out there that don't have names. And so I don't think that's necessary to make something a benchmark.
Welcome to the Best Hour of Your Day podcast. This is your host, Felix, and in this podcast, I am interviewing CrossFitters and experts from around the world. In this episode, I talked to Pat Sherwood. Pat is the owner of CrossFit Linchpin, one of the best, if not the best, online training programs out there. And together we talk about the importance of benchmark workouts. We are defining what a benchmark workout is, and we talk about how often you should do benchmark workouts in order to progress in your training. Have a lot of fun and enjoy this conversation with Pat Sherwood. Welcome back to the podcast, Pat. So good to have you here.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for the invite.
You do a lot of podcasting yourself. Are you a guest on a lot of shows, or is it mainly that you do your own thing?
No, I almost never do other podcasts. I couldn't tell you the last time I was on somebody's podcast. It was probably over a year ago or more.
Oh, nice. That's great. And I feel very honored that you're on this show today.
It's my pleasure. Everybody and their brother has a podcast these days. And it's funny when you reached out, life gets so hectic and busy that, I wasn't familiar with you, but I knew that you had Adrian on recently. Maybe you mentioned that, or when I checked or whatnot. So before I replied to you, I reached out to Boz. And I was like, hey, this guy hit me up. Is he okay? Or is he a knucklehead? Or what's the deal? And he's like, oh, no, man, it was good. We had a good time. I was like, all right, cool. I'll reply to him.
Okay, cool. So
you passed the test.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thanks, Adrian Bosman, for the recommendation. Do you have a lot of touch points with your German community, or is CrossFit Linchpin like 90%, 95% centered around US?
It's probably largely in the United States, but man, we're from all over in the world, especially in the BTW squad feature for Linchpin and our private Facebook group. There's everyone all over Europe, Asia, Latin America, people speaking in, their native tongue and then bringing it back to English. It really is global. And I've got we definitely have some people out there in Germany as well. But I got to ask you, I'm so impressed. I mean, anyone who speaks more than one language, I find incredibly impressive. How in the world? I know us as Americans are horrible at just being single language individuals. And I've got a passion for Spanish, and I studied it off and on my entire life. I think it's a beautiful language, and I can speak just enough to get myself in trouble. But I could never even contemplate doing an interview or a podcast in something other than my native language. How is your English so amazing?
Thank you. Actually, it's a lot of practice. I think I studied in Hong Kong for 6 months, but that was like 10 years ago. So I always tried to have a lot of practice. And I listened to a lot of English-speaking shows and podcasts, and sometimes I even speak to myself just for the practice sake, right? And just recently I started interviewing people in English, because all the time before I did like 400 podcast episodes in German. And I thought, okay, now it's the time to like widen your horizon and like try something new. And I was so afraid in the beginning. I was really, really afraid. But when I recorded the first episode with Marcus Philly, it went down so smooth and it was so cool that I thought, okay, you don't have to be panic mode. Worst case, you fuck it up, you just press stop and then you cut it out. And yeah, that's like the worst thing that can happen.
Yes, and truth be told, most of the time, it's been my opinion anyway, especially when I've been down in Latin America and South America, and I know that my Spanish is far from perfect and is full of mistakes. They don't care. They absolutely love the fact that there's some dude from the US attempting his best to speak their language, and they're warm and gracious and accommodating, and it opens doors. Like, I was always so scared of making a mistake that the other side of the conversation, they don't care.
Yeah, in the end, it's just you and yourself, and you holding yourself back from doing something new, trying something new, and that's such a big step when you're just doing it, and you don't have to fear anything. That's the same with stepping a foot into a CrossFit box or whatever, right? It's always like the first step is super hard and you're probably afraid, but then it gets better from time to time.
Yeah, I just had to give you a shout out, man. As somebody who's a lover of languages, it always captures my attention when I see that. And I think it's such a superpower that, I mean, I would rather be fluent in another language than have a 300-pound snatch, like, any day of the week. Like, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I speak English quite good, so I can interview people and that's cool. But yeah, that's probably only German and English. I mean, I understand some Spanish, maybe some Italian and French, but I can't speak it. So I get along with it. But I mean, English is so much more used around the world compared to German. You speak it in Germany, you speak it in Austria, some parts of Switzerland, but that's it, right? So Germany is like the German language. Yeah, it's not so cool.
Well, anyway, you get my respect for that one.
Thank you. I just checked my camera and the battery says it's slow. So I just replaced the battery and then we make a short break and I'll be back in a minute, okay? So I have 7 batteries lying around and they're all fully charged except for one. And
Of course.
I picked the one who's empty.
Of course. That's how it always goes.
So for today's interview, I received some feedback from my community, and they sometimes ask, like your community, they ask for some content questions.
Okay.
And not in the extent that I have like hundreds of questions every week, but sometimes I get 1 or 2 questions. And there was a question about benchmark workouts. Maybe that's something you can, you can talk to me about.
Yeah, happy to. Was it any specific question somebody had?
I mean, I prepared some questions, so we'll have a guideline, and I hope you're having fun.
Yeah, man, I'll go wherever you go.
I think it was 2013, 2014, like 10 years ago, when I did my first open workouts and when I got in touch with benchmark workouts. Before, I knew there were some workouts, some famous workouts with girls' names on it, some hero workouts, but I never really knew, and I tried to like get to know them all. I tried them all. I mean, that's probably what every CrossFitter is doing. Yeah, you have a checklist and you see, okay, did you do it? And I used Beyond the Whiteboard back in the day, and it was so cool because you always got your new PRs, and then you have 90% percentile, and you're a dragon, and it was so cool. But I think a lot of people nowadays, when they join a CrossFit box, especially in my CrossFit box, they're missing the whole history behind that. So where did it all start? What's a benchmark workout? Where does it come from? Why is it named after girls? What is a hero workout? And I'm really trying to tell the story and have chats with people who are so long in the game that they know the origin story of those benchmark workouts. Let's talk about that. What's your experience with the benchmark workouts? When did you first hear about them?
I certainly heard about them when I first started playing with CrossFit, learning about CrossFit, and doing it myself, which was back in 2005. And at that point in time, I had the same experience as you, working out for years, but it just totally kicked my butt like I'd never worked out in my life. And, the benchmark workouts largely existed at that time, your classics of Nancy and Fran and Helen and Cindy and Diane and Grace and all that good stuff. And with, so many other workouts that didn't have a name, those are a little bit easier just to track. And you could tell when they came back up again, they stuck in your mind. And they were ones that, for whatever reason, when Greg created them, he had a bit of inspiration or, a particular person that he had in mind and applied that label. And not all of them have an actual person behind them. But, some do and some don't. And so they just kind of came just like yourself. Those are the ones that people would seem to repeat over and over again because you could tell when, something named Helen popped back up or Fran popped back up. And some of them were unique and beautiful and notorious in and of themselves that they etched out a place in history like Fran. I mean, there is really nothing quite like Fran. It is beautiful and miserable and disgusting all at the same time, and it's one of those workouts that allows an athlete with a certain level of fitness to express a level of intensity that's really tough to mimic in a bunch of other workouts. So some of those classic benchmark workouts, as far as I'm concerned, are stunningly beautiful, and I don't think that a lot of things replicate them these days. They really do stand the test of time.
Would you say there's a specific definition of a benchmark workout, or can every workout in a way be a benchmark workout for yourself? For example, if you define like 5 different workouts for yourself and you say, those are my 5 benchmark workouts, or is there like, as you just said, they have to be like thought about, beautifully designed, and they need to have a purpose?
Truth be told, there's no rules. So you could identify your own benchmarks and make anything in the world that you wanted to. You could create a workout today, tomorrow, give it a name, don't give it a name, do whatever you want and make that a benchmark workout. As far as I'm concerned, benchmark with some people might say that it has to have a name associated with it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think a benchmark workout has to have a name. A benchmark workout could also be just something which makes multiple appearances. For example, a 5x5 back squat day is most certainly a benchmark of strength, but it doesn't have a name, at all. And it doesn't have any crazy fanfare and excitement associated with it. 7x1 deadlift is a benchmark. 5K run is a benchmark. Like there's plenty of benchmarks out there that don't have names. And so I don't think that's necessary to make something a benchmark.
So the big question is, and that was one of the questions I received, what's the reason behind doing benchmark workouts? Why should we do them?
So benchmark workouts, another way I would just say it is repeat workouts, and so repeat workouts can be a great way to assess that everything you're doing is moving in the right direction, and this I think comes into if every time you did something, you did it different every single solitary time, to include something like a 5x5 back squat. Okay, we do a 5x5 back squat. We do it at some time in the future. But last time we did it, we rested very strict 3 minutes between each set of 5x5 back squat. Today, we're going to rest 2 minutes. That's a different workout, even though it's a 5x5 back squat. And then if the next time it comes up, you rest 1 minute between each set of 5x5, it's a very different workout than resting 3 minutes. And the next time it comes up, you go back to the 3-minute rest, but this time you do box squats. That's a different workout. And like you could literally probably never touch the exact same workout if you wanted to, but still have intelligently laid out, varied programming that makes a lot of sense and be propelling your strength and conditioning forward. But since you never did the exact same thing, you would never have the same metric to see how is my 5x5 under the same conditions that I did it 6 months ago. So the wonderful thing about a benchmark workout is if you can replicate the exact same scenario, the exact same environment, the exact same everything, and then you can see, is what I'm doing actually paying off, Last time I did a 5x5 back squat, 3 minutes rest between each. I held, let's just say 100 kilos. across all those sets. I retested it 6 months later, and I held, 205 kilos. Mission accomplished. You can say unequivocally that you are stronger at that exact same thing. But if you never came back to that exact deal, you're probably getting stronger, but you can't say definitively in that particular area. And you could apply that with conditioning workouts, gymnastics, the whole 9 yards. So it's useful. Benchmarks serve a really great purpose. It's like testing. You go to school, you take tests, you want to make sure that the classes you're attending every day are actually yielding the result that you hope that they are.
Speaking of frequency, when you look at your own programming, or we're in the CrossFit box, we were following the CrossFit affiliate programming. When I look at the workouts, I rarely see the same workout over the course of 6 months, I would say. But still, there are a lot of people who think that they need to repeat the same workout like every week, every 2 weeks, in order to see if they got fitter, stronger, better.
Yes. Well, I guess the short answer is that those people are incorrect. The frequency with which a particular let's say the lifting scheme is easy. 5x5 back squat. There's nothing wrong with. You could have a scenario where a 5x5 back squat doesn't pop up again for 6 months, and that'd be totally good to go, because what people might not understand is they say, well, it's been 6 months since we did that workout. That's far too long. Yes, it's 6 months since you did that precise workout, right? But over the course of those 6 months, you probably did a 7x1 back squat day. You did doubles. You did triples. You might have done a wave of 2, 3, 5, 10, 2, 3, 5, 10. And then maybe you didn't touch the 5x5 back squat, but then you did, all those same rep schemes for the front squat, and you did some sets of 8, and you did some heavy 10s, and then you did overhead squat, and then you did all this heavy below parallel squatting that covered all of your bases and got you so stronger and hit all this beautiful variance. And then when that 5x5 pops up again, even though quote unquote it's been 6 months, yes, but it hasn't been 6 months since you've done heavy squatting, inappropriate squatting. And that same thing happens with a whole bunch of other workouts as well. It wouldn't make sense to test something so frequently that you didn't allow the athlete to have adaptation and develop. You wouldn't test your back squat today and test it again tomorrow and test it again the next day. That wouldn't be a smart play. So something like that, about 6 months, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. You don't necessarily have to wait that long, but that's perfectly fine and perfectly good to go. And I would also say, what I think some people might not understand initially is there could be something where maybe you have a heavy deadlift day, like a 7x1 deadlift or something day, right? And maybe like 3 weeks go by and you don't have a heavy deadlift day at all. Maybe you do Diane, maybe you do Grace that only has, 135, or that is, in kilos at like 60 kilos or something, and like, well, we haven't deadlifted heavy. And then 3 or 4 weeks down the road, you have another heavy deadlift day and everyone's plenty strong and maybe even increases their lifts, and they're confused as to why that happened because they have not been deadlifting heavy regularly. And well, that's what makes CrossFit so confusing to the outside world. Somebody who comes from a classic strength and conditioning background is, if you took a step back and said, okay, maybe we haven't done a heavy deadlift, but what musculature do you need to improve to help your deadlift? Well, glutes, hamstrings, quads to help extend the knees. We need a strong midline, spinal erectors, lats definitely come into play, like grip strength. And like, okay, well, have we been doing things which strengthen those areas? And the answer is absolutely yes. And so even though you maybe haven't done that one movement, you have been training the necessary musculature, if you're following good, well thought out, detailed programming, that now when this lift comes up that you haven't seen in a while and it goes really well, that can be confusing to somebody who doesn't really understand programming.
I know that you're a big fan of not having heavy lifts and a Metcon at the same time in the same
Correct.
workout. And yeah, me too. So I'm like a big fan of doing strength work separately from Metcons, because I know it for myself. When I do a very heavy lift and I really put 100% in the lift, I perform like 50 or 60% in a Metcon and the other way around.
Makes
And
sense.
but still, there are a lot of people outside and even in my box who really feel that they're undertrained when they just have a 5x5 front squat like today. Today is a very, very good example. We have 5x5 front squat, 3-minute rest. And
Mm-hmm.
the
Great day.
people who showed up, I mean, you can count on one hand, right? And okay, it's sunny outside, it's very warm, but it doesn't really matter. I guarantee you, when the workout is like a very, very cool benchmark workout like Cindy, the number of people who would join the classes today would be way higher. Why do you think people don't understand? I mean, you just said it, right? The people, they don't understand that you're getting stronger without really doing the strength lift every week.
Why don't people get that? Or why don't people show up for the 5x5 front squat?
I mean, you can answer both if you want to.
Well, why don't people get it? I guess if I'm being really fair, like my most charitable, kind, optimistic view is some people don't want to get it. I mean, to really understand programming and the methodology, like it takes a lot of time and effort and reading, and not everybody wants to do that. Some people just want to show up. They're busy. They got 3 kids. They got work. They don't want to have to think about that. That's what they pay you for. They're going to walk in, tell me what to do, and I'm going to leave. I'm not going to read the CrossFit Journal. I'm not going to get lost in a bunch of YouTube videos. I got other stuff to do. I come here to work out and I go home. And so they don't really actually know. But human beings, we tend to think that we know everything, which is a mistake, right? People think because they do a CrossFit workout every day that they must know a lot about CrossFit. That's completely false. All that means is you do a CrossFit workout every day. Like, you could have been doing it for 5 years, but if all you do is walk in the gym and walk out, that doesn't mean you really understand the methodology or really understand why you might know that it does work because you've seen it work for you and your friends, but that doesn't mean you know how it really works, like in the details, and that you could create a structure yourself, which would take a large number of people of varying ability levels on this long-term journey of health and fitness. And, it's like me, I drive a car every single day. I've been driving for decades. That doesn't mean I know how cars work. That doesn't mean that I'm an engineer or I could build a car. That doesn't mean that I'm a race car driver. It means I have like the bare minimum knowledge to hopefully do my commute and not get in an accident. That's it. And I think a lot of people attending gyms do that. And it would be just as preposterous if I said, I've been driving a car for 10 years. I know everything there is to know about cars. Why? Do you study? Do you have a degree? Did you work in the industry? No, but I drive one every day. It doesn't. And I think a lot of people fall into that same kind of trap in the gym.
I mean, when you started CrossFit Linchpin programming, that was years ago. There weren't so many programs out there, right? I remember CompTrain was
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a big part. And I mean, Ben Bergeron, he was always doing like the Metcon plus strength training thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my friends, they liked this kind of workout because they liked strength training plus Metcons. I
Sure.
never really understood how someone is capable of doing both in 90 minutes. I was like completely blown away after one workout, but I let them do their things. Do you think that it is harder to quote unquote justify a good programming today now that there are so many different programmings out there from so many CrossFit athletes who now retired and they're all doing their own programs and they all look familiar with a lot of volume, with a lot of strength, a lot of Metcon, a lot of accessory work?
Yeah. It's a big world out there, right? There's millions and billions of people in the world working out, and there's a little something for everybody. And I do not think what you just described right there, which is, very popular to some degree, where we're going to do a heavy lift every day, then we're going to do something else. It has been my experience over all these years that for most people, that is unnecessary, not optimally effective, and potentially injurious. And so for most people, I wouldn't recommend it. And quite frankly, I get a lot of people who come to Linchpin from something else because they get sucked in by the flash, and I'm going to lift heavy every day and I'm going to get so strong. And then we're going to do this little workout at the end. I'm going to build my engine. And for most people, it doesn't shake out that way. They either overtrain, like you're saying, instead of doing one thing well, like a 5x5 front squat, they do two things in a mediocre fashion, and neither one really improves. And then after trying to lift heavy every day in like a rushed fashion where you can't really do a proper warm-up and you don't really have ample time to build up your warm-up sets before you begin to your working sets, and then you can't really take 3 or 4 minutes between the lifts because we got to go. We got an hour class. We got stuff to do. So you rush. Well, you're not really going to lift super heavy. And so it might take a month, it might take 6 months, it might take a year, but for most people, that doesn't pan out how they thought it was going to do. And then they try something else, and it's like, it makes sense when you break it down to them. It's like, if you pour your heart and soul into something, it goes well. If you do something half-heartedly and half effort, and it's not going to go well. And I remember I did a very not random interview with Lawrence Chalet. I don't know if you know who that gentleman is, but he's a 10-time world's strongest man competitor. I think he was strongest in Europe twice, I believe. He's a beast. I mean, a beast. And his whole life is about being as strong as humanly possible. And I told him, I'm like, this is your whole world, Lawrence, getting strong. Period. End of story. I said, and you've got these CrossFit athletes that, they're going to go to the gym 5 or 6 days a week, and they think they're going to lift heavy every single one of those days and then do something after that. And he just flat out was like, well, that doesn't make any sense, and that's not going to work. And I was like, well, I know, but I have a very tough time convincing other people of that. And he said when he was at his, he is training his tail off to try to be the strongest person in the world. And that's all. He didn't care about his 5K, didn't care about his, it was just strength training. He's a one-dimensional athlete. He would lift no more than 3 times a week. And that's trying to be the world's strongest man. Now you've got a regular person lifting 5 or 6 times a week. You're lifting twice as much as a world's strongest man. How does that make any sense at all? And so, I don't know, man, it's out there. And little by little, I hope people are realizing that that's not the best way to train for most people.
One of the questions I always get when we have a benchmark workout programmed, let's say it's Grace, we had that this week, 30 clean and jerks with 60 and 40 something kilos. How do you approach programming this workout for people who are even stronger or not strong enough to do it as prescribed?
I would say most of the time, you wouldn't need to make it harder for somebody. That most of the time it's going to be, hey, this is actually a bit too hard for you, too heavy, and we need to knock it back. Even if I had Dan Bailey show up to my garage, who has probably one of the world's fastest Grace times on the planet, and I've seen him, he did Grace in just over a minute. I was in the room when he did it. It was his metabolic system got hit by a freight train. He did not feel the need to go heavier, right? I mean, he was just blitzing fast, but in order for him to do that, it took every molecule of energy in his whole body, and he was hyperventilating. So he wasn't shortchanged. So it's a very rare individual, I would say, that it's quote unquote not hard enough, because that one workout, right? That one workout doesn't live in isolation. That one workout was whoever was doing the programming, I would assume, over the course of the training block on that particular day, what fit was an Olympic lift, ground overhead, explosive hip opening, moderate loading, relatively short time domain. And there's other things than Grace that could have fit in there. Grace is one of many things that probably fit that training need on that day. Grace isn't magic. If you looked at what was needed for the training response, Grace just was an option, and it fit well. And so now if we understand why, it's not that we need to do grace, is we need to cover those bases that we said before: pull off the ground, explosive hip on the ground overhead, moderate loading, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now I can look at my athletes and I can still achieve those required training stimuluses in a variety of ways that will be similar to grace, but not exactly it. Like somebody might do grace in, Dan Bailey does it in sub 90 seconds. Great. The beasts in your gym do it in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Great. A fantastic time is 3 minutes. It's really amazing that you did grace in 3 minutes. Like that used to be something that would be headline news, and now a lot of people have 3-minute graces. Sub 5 is still really good for a grace. You didn't do a wrong training stimulus because grace took you 5 minutes. And I would even say, like on the upper echelons of it, let's say that somebody takes grace takes them 8 minutes. Okay, so that's literally 4 times as long as somebody in your class who took 2 minutes. It took them 400% longer. Does that mean that the workout was wrong for them? It just depends, right? If they were safe the entire time, good form, good technique, and had an appropriate level of struggle, but what they need to do is that particular loading for them is quite a challenge and where they need to be to improve as an athlete, then I wouldn't see anything wrong with them going 8 minutes. I don't want to see anybody going, 12, 15, 20 minutes with grace. That now we're getting a little bit crazy. But I wouldn't feel the need to say that everybody has to do grace sub 3 minutes. I wouldn't think that that's the right call either. It is a bit individual. Now, if that person is going to take 8 minutes to do grace, and after the first 15 clean and jerks, it was so taxing for them that they start to look not good, unsafe, things are breaking down, well, then that's inappropriate. We stop them. Let's lower the load. And now we know next time it shouldn't be 60 kilos for you. It should be 50 kilos or something like that. And you're going to finish the last 15 reps at a lower weight. And I'm going to be watching your form. And so it's a largely individual, and that's what coaches get paid for, right? Because if you have 30 people in your class, you have 20 people in your class, and you give 3 different options for grace, which is a nice amount of options, I guarantee there's somebody who needs a 4th option. Like there just is. They've got a bad shoulder, whatever it happens to be. And then somebody else has something else going on. And so the largest thing I think to do as a coach or a trainer is to understand what is the intent of the workout? What's the purpose? Why are we doing it today? We're not doing it to get better at grace. That's not why we do grace. We do grace because the strength and conditioning elements associated with explosive hip opening and pulling off the ground and going overhead produce a certain athletic effect that I can get to. And I have a wide strike zone as a coach or trainer as to how to modify that workout to make it fit for that athlete. So I don't know if I answered your question or if I rambled there for a while.
No, it did. And it probably didn't answer even more questions. So, I don't know how you feel about it, but we have a lot of people who, let's say a pull-up is programmed in a workout like Cindy, and we give them different options. We try to have them pull-ups. Then if they don't have 5 pull-ups, maybe they do 3 pull-ups. So we scale the reps. Sometimes we use bands. They can do banded pull-ups, but we still have a lot of people who they can't do pull-ups. So they just go to the rings and do ring rows all the time. What would you say to those people in order to, make them do some more than just ring rows? Because from my experience and from my knowledge, like ring rows and pull-ups they're both pulling movements, but one is horizontally, one is vertically. And I mean, you're missing a lot of athletic development when you only do this one exercise and you never do something else. How do you talk to those people?
Well, I agree with you that variance is your friend, right? And so if you're still developing your pull-ups, I wouldn't do the exact same scale or modification every time, or do both. You could do ring rows, you could do bands, you could do the name is escaping me right now, where you've got the bar over your head and you're kind of in a seated position on the floor with your legs out at 90 degrees and you're pulling up from there, like an assisted pull up with your legs on the floor as well. I would, talking to this person, I would ask them, like, kind of like we talked about with grace, like, why are we even doing grace? It's not to get better at grace, and so that there's three elements of Cindy, and why are you doing ring rows, or you're doing this upper body pull? The point of whether it's a ring row or a pull up or a banded pull up is to develop your upper body pulling capacity. And so wherever you are in your fitness journey of whatever makes sense, that athlete should be doing something, and this is the key word, I think, appropriately challenging for the athlete. Because if you're not challenging the system and stressing the system doesn't adapt and grow. And so if you're always choosing something that's too easy for you and you're not really allowing yourself that discomfort, that stress, and that challenge, you're going to either plateau or you're not going to advance, or why are you even doing it? Like, you're in the gym to, again, improve your strength and conditioning, and strength and conditioning improves through stressing a system, get the adaptation, stressing the system, get the adaptation. And so I would just let people know that stressing the system is a critical part. And that stressing the system looks a bit different for everybody. It could be in the various loadings we talked about on grace, or it could be even just with something as simple as the ring row. I think the ring rows are phenomenal and a beautiful movement because, man, yeah, you can just barely lean your body back in a ring row and make them so laughably easy that you just get a fast time. You didn't do yourself any favors. Well, that's not the point of the ring row. Or you can keep lowering your body down all the way to, like, your feet are on a box, your body's parallel with the ground, you're planked out, and you can make ring rows almost as darn hard as, like, strict pull-ups, because there's no hip drive and you're parallel with the ground. Those things are hard, but that's not how most people do ring rows. So I would encourage a client, like, hey, even if you're all about the ring row right now, okay, you don't want to hook up a band, you don't want to do something else, let's find the angle of your body that by the time you're pulling that fifth ring row in Cindy, it's a darn struggle. And you probably couldn't have got 7 or 8. Now, if you do that for Cindy, even though it's ring rows, you are stressing your upper body in an appropriate way that I bet you're going to get the adaptation from it, and you're going to get stronger or keep moving your body. And I would play that same game with somebody with a band, right? Far too many people just want to grab a band that gives them way too much help so that they're an unbroken hero on the pull-ups and they get a fast time. But again, you shouldn't be doing the workout with the sole point of getting a fast time. You should be doing the workout based upon why we're doing the actual workout. We're going to develop our upper body pulling in Cindy, our upper body pressing in a gymnastics fashion, and relatively, moderate volume sets of unloaded squats below parallel. Like, that's the stimulus we're looking to get. And so you need to make changes, modifications, adaptations, whatever it is to those movements in the workout to challenge yourself appropriately so that the workout delivers what it was intended to do. And if you're not doing that, yeah, you're not sitting on the couch, so that's great, but you're shortchanging yourself and you're not getting anywhere near the benefit from the workout as you could have. You're operating at a fraction of your capacity.
So that what you just described should be one of the main or one of the key elements of every coach in a class to translate the movement function to the member who's doing a movement in order to understand why he's doing the movement. Do you feel like nowadays there are a lot of coaches who they're just there to entertain the people and they didn't really understand the whole CrossFit methodology and the whole thing and the whole programming and why we do all the things we do? Did it get worse during the last few years, or is it just my own feeling? Because when I joined different classes and different boxes all over Germany, I had a lot of experiences with coaches where I really, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, I followed the class, but in the end, I was very shocked that that was the experience someone gets when he joins a class.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of CrossFit gyms out there, which means there's a lot of CrossFit trainers. And I don't think that, I think the same rules that apply to just human beings in general and how human beings conduct themselves with their level of knowledge, expertise, dedication, study, perseverance, whatever it happens to be, those same traits occur in CrossFit and every other industry. There's you go to 5 different CrossFit boxes, you'll get 5 different experiences. When my car breaks down, there's 10 different mechanics and automotive shops in my town, and some of them are terrible, and I don't understand how they're in business. And they've been in business for years. I don't get it. And other ones, I walk in and they're only a couple kilometers down the road, and they're a mechanic shop just like everybody else, and they charge similar prices. Yet when I walk in, the experience is totally different. I can tell I'm dealing with professionals that take their job very serious. Things are diagnosed immediately. Problems are fixed. It happens on a good timeline. They communicate well. And if I found that I didn't have that experience with the mechanic shop down the road, it's a lesson learned, and I don't go back there. And that's mechanics, that's doctors, that's carpenters, that's bricklayers, that's teachers, that's CrossFit coaches. That's just human beings. It's podcasters. Not all about it's whatever it is. And, you have the freedom, and I would recommend that people take advantage of that freedom to shop around. If you're going to go spend your hard-earned money somewhere and you're looking for high-level professional coaching, don't settle for anything other than high-level professional coaching. And even if you're a new athlete and you don't really know what that means, here's the thing. If over the course of a month you popped into 4 or 5 or 6 different gyms, even if you weren't a seasoned athlete, you would be able to tell which was the right gym for you and which trainers really got it and really cared. It would be obvious, and especially in hindsight when you look back over your 6 different experiences. And so I would recommend that people do that, because your long-term health and fitness is very precious. Your knees, back, and shoulders, you should take the health and the care of them really, really serious, and only put them in the hands of somebody who knows what the heck they're doing.
Do you think that members should challenge their coaches and ask questions on a frequent basis?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm a big fan. I've done a lot of interviews with, I've interviewed a lot of people in my life and all this stuff, and I've asked a lot of questions to a lot of people. A lot of people have asked me a lot of questions, and I think I'm a true believer that you can ask almost anybody, almost anything you want. It really depends upon how you ask it. And people can tell if you are asking a question because you're genuinely curious and you're confused and you actually just don't really understand what's happening. And that nobody should ever have a problem answering a question like that, especially if somebody's paying you for a service. They're paying you for a service. You work for them. And if they have a question, a genuine, honest question about something that's happening, that question should be met with warmth and kindness and a sharp, intelligent response. And if you're asking an honest question and somebody seems like they're annoyed at you for asking a question, that would be a really weird experience in my personal opinion.
So you would encourage people to proactively ask the coach to scale a movement in a certain way, or how do you think about that?
Well, it depends. Now here's the other side, right? If a coach is trying to get 20 people through the class and you've got this one person who's just asking silly questions, that's a different story. It's like, okay, well, now you're just delaying everything and asking nonsense questions. Like that does exist, and that isn't helpful to anybody. But if you have a real question, you should be able to ask a real question. Period, end of story. The scaling aspect would, in the best case scenario, ideally, utopia, the coach would have been watching you for a while, knows your deal, and would be offering you hey, we got this going on today. Hey, John, I know you have this going on with your shoulder. I think this is going to be a great way for us to substitute and modify this for you. And he would know that, she would know that. But if that's not the case, and you know yourself, and you know that maybe whatever the workout is, it's a bit heavy or it's a bit whatever, it's just not a good idea for you, that you think it should be scaled or tweaked or modified in some way, and that's the intelligent thing to do, and that is not being brought up by the trainer, I think you should absolutely advocate for yourself. Absolutely. Don't just let your ego get in the way and do something with weight or squatting that you shouldn't do, because it's just not worth it. And everybody who's very young thinks that they're bulletproof and they are immune to injury and they don't need to recover and all this stuff. I'm here to tell you, all of that stuff catches up with you. And it's making good decisions is always the right thing to do. So get your ego out of the way and make good decisions.
Yeah, that's probably wraps it up very, very precisely, because that's what I discovered recently, or probably not recently. I feel like I'm 31. My problems probably started with 25. So I discovered back problems, knee problems, shoulder problems from too much training, from overtraining, from not training smart and not enough mobility work. And now I'm paying the price because I cannot work out to my full capacity as I liked. So I have to scale a lot of movements and I have to leave my ego at the door a lot of times.
Absolutely, man. And that's our role, hopefully, as coaches or people doing these podcasts, is to hopefully prevent other people from making the same mistakes so that they have an overall better experience and they experience better longevity. That's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, we have people in the box who are 65, 70 years old, and they're crushing it. They're fitter, they're stronger than their 20-year-old training buddies. And it's really, really cool to see that they're getting older every year, but they're getting fitter as well. So the program itself, it works phenomenally. And it's so cool that you see when you use a certain program over a long period of time, you can still make gains at an older age. And I just love it so much.
100%. I agree with you. It's anybody can work out really hard for a day, a week, a couple months, maybe even a year. But if you're still working out 5, 10, 15 years down the road, you're winning. Like, I don't even care what you back squat. If you're in your 50s and you're back squatting, you are a hero. Most people aren't doing that. I don't care what the weight is on the bar. You're back squatting. That's phenomenal.
Most people don't know what a back squat is, so
absolutely, 100%.
I mean, we live in the bubble, and probably we are the 1%, and 99% don't even know what CrossFit is or what fitness training can do with the body and how important it is to stay healthy and for the longevity. And that's what you always have to do. Remind yourself that you're the 1%, and 99% of the people, they don't do anything. That's why they look how they look. That's why they feel how they feel. And that's why they have problems with 40, 50, 60 years old. And it's very important to play the long game, to show up 4, 5, 6 times a week and do the thing, and don't really care about the back squat PR or a deadlift PR all the time. That's what I decided for myself, that it's way more important to go to the gym, to show up, to have fun, to do a nice workout. And that's my message. The most important thing I can tell the people is that it always have to be so much fun that you show up the next day.
Absolutely, yeah. And not to derail our conversation or have it take longer than it should, but I think also wrapped up into that, and I didn't get this early in my CrossFit career, and I only have recently, and it's such a huge deal, is the difference between training and testing. Is I think that too many younger CrossFitters think that every workout is a test. Every workout is maximal effort. Every workout is 100% intensity, as if it's a test. I always have to beat my last thing. You're not going to be able to do that forever. Period. End of story. And maybe you can get away with that for a while in your 20s or whatnot, but there's going to become a point in time where you have to understand the difference between training and testing. And so, like, if I do 5 workouts over the course of the week, I really only try to like drop the hammer and go high intensity on one to two of those. So that's less than half, no matter how you cut it. 20% of the workouts, 40% of the workouts if it's two, and the other 60 to 80% of the time, it's a moderate intensity day or even a low intensity day. And allowing myself moderate and low intensity days lets me be ready on a high intensity day to really get after it. It's just not sustainable for most people to do high intensity every day, but I think a lot of young CrossFitters don't realize that. And even with like a heavy day, if a 5x5 back squat comes up again, you could make it a testing day if you wanted to. Test your 5 rep max back squat to see where it's at. Or you could just allow yourself a training day, meaning that you're just going to lift whatever feels like a heavy set of 5. And if it's less than it was last time, that's okay, because you know what? Last time a 5x5 back squat came up, okay, maybe it was 3 months ago. So you're like, I have 3 months of training under my belt. I should be stronger. But what were the 1, 2, or 3 workouts prior to this 5x5 back squat? Maybe you're walking in with tired legs. Maybe you've got a kid at home who's sick and you're feeling a little bit sick. Maybe you've been stressed out at work. Maybe your nutrition's been bad. Maybe you haven't been sleeping. And so like, yeah, the workout numbers are the same, but there could be 15 other really important aspects of your life that are so important and impactful, and they're totally different this time. So just allow yourself to go in and make it a training day, not a testing day. Whatever feels heavy today, I'm going to lift it 5 times. I'm going to stay safe. I'm going to have a great day. I'm going to go home. And now I squatted heavy below parallel. I achieved the training stimulus. The training stimulus wasn't you have to set a lifetime PR today. The training stimulus was based upon where we've been, going heavy below parallel makes sense today. And I think that's an important thing for people to realize, the whole training versus testing.
Pat, in the end, I have some questions for you. So what is your favorite benchmark workouts when we stay here with the benchmark workouts?
For benchmark workouts, I really like Helen. 400-meter runs, kettlebell swings, and the pull-ups. I think Helen is absolutely beautiful.
What's your best time on Helen?
I would have to look that up, but I've definitely been around 8 minutes, which for me is pretty darn good.
I think I never did that below 8 minutes because I'm very bad at running, and probably my running takes 8 minutes. So
that's the beautiful part about Helen, right? Is the kettlebell swings, eventually a lot of people can do them unbroken. It's 12 pull-ups, and while that's challenging for a lot of people, eventually after years of CrossFit, like that's not outrageous either. And so when you get to that point, your only way to do Helen faster is to run faster. And that's exactly what nobody wants to do. And that's why I think it's kind of so beautiful.
Yeah, that was probably the coolest workout to watch at the CrossFit Games this year, because you really saw the people, they all were so fast on the 400-meter runs. They took them like 1 minute to 1:15.
That's crazy.
And they had to run so fast because the people next to them, they ran fast, and it was like really, really cool to see.
Absolutely.
So what is your favorite movement?
I've got a couple. They're all related. Believe it or not, I really love dumbbell thrusters. I think dumbbell thruster is such a beautiful movement. And if I had to have a number 2, I really like a barbell squat clean.
I didn't expect the dumbbell thrusters, but
it's not too many people like thrusters in general, let alone dumbbell thrusters, and I don't know why. I just really, in a weird way, I really do.
What is your favorite CrossFit box?
Ooh, it's a great question. CrossFit Roots in Boulder, Colorado is fantastic. They just do things right. Everything you talked about earlier, like coaching, caring, knowledge, understanding, scaling, like they get it. Like they are a high quality professional box. And then I would say out on the East Coast of the United States in New York, CrossFit South Brooklyn is a fantastic, like in the city, a lot of character, fantastic people and coaches. Those two would be very high on the list.
Do you prefer to work out in a CrossFit box or alone in your garage?
Man, I love Alone in My Garage. I do. It's I think it's just my time for whatever reason, where I can just get some quiet time, decompress, put on a podcast that I want to listen to or something like that, shut my brain off. And, you know, like I said before, it's a big fitness world out there. There's something for everybody. So gym owners shouldn't think that people work out in their garage are like hurting their business or vice versa. There's so many people in the world. There's plenty for everybody. But, like for me, I've got a lot of just bumps and bruises and injuries in my body, not from CrossFit, from motorcycle wrecks and dumb stuff that happened in the military and whatnot, that sometimes I wouldn't be able to warm up properly in a regular warm up in an affiliate. It just wouldn't work. I'd need an extra 10 minutes. I threw the whole class off, some of that stuff. So for me to be able to go in there and do what I need to do to set myself up for success, and no matter how long that takes, it's just a far better fit for me. And I can go in there at any time of the day or night, which is so convenient.
So what is your favorite time to work out then?
I do not like working out in the mornings. I would love to get it out of the way, but I'm just not ready to do it. Usually either just before lunch or mid-afternoon, like a couple hours after lunch. That's usually, I don't usually work out in the late afternoon or evening. Yeah, it's usually late morning or mid-afternoon.
How many times a week do you work out?
Five times a week. I take Thursdays and Sundays off.
What is your favorite supplement?
I was going to say that I don't take any supplements, but that's not true. I do have, for years and years and years, I didn't take anything, but I do have a container of protein powder in the kitchen, and I just have a protein shake after a workout. Not because I'm convinced that it does anything, probably because it's just a delicious treat that tastes really good. And if it happens to help me in some sort of physical way, great. But it's just a reason for me to drink something that tastes like chocolate or cookies and cream and do it, 5 times a week and feel good about it.
What brand do you use?
I couldn't even tell you. I think it's called, is it Optimum Nutrition or something like that? It's just, I just went down to the
Optimum Nutrition. Yeah, I know that.
I think that's it. I walk my very scientific selection process is I go down to the local store that sells it and I see which one seems to be on sale and I purchase that one.
It's a smart way.
I figured they all have to be really close. I mean, come on.
I mean, it's the same stuff in it. One is sweeter, one is probably a little bit more healthy, but in the end, it's all protein powder from the same sources.
I think we're real close.
What is your favorite recovery tool?
Somebody gave me one of those percussion like therapy guns. I think it is a Theragun. I think that's the name of it. And it works really well. Based upon an injury I've got from the military, my right hip flexor is always catastrophically, terrifyingly tight all the time. It just, due to that injury, it is what it is. And so nothing seems to help that up. And that does seem to help it. So I find myself using that pretty regularly, and I've got some pretty tight lats from things that have happened in the past. So I'll hit it with that as well. But I must admit, they're a bit on the expensive side. So if somebody hadn't given one to me, I probably never would have actually bought it and spent the money on it. So it worked out well that I kind of got one.
Do you sauna or prefer like a cold plunge?
I don't do either, but I will tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, if hardcore scientific, like irrefutable, it's fact, it's not opinion, you can't argue with it, data came out that doing a cold plunge every day would increase all of your physical standings by 25%, I would not do it. I have no interest in going into the cold water. If it adds 10 years to my life, I wouldn't do it. Increased memory function, wouldn't do it. Decreased stress, wouldn't do it. I have no interest in it from back in the day of, my time in the Navy SEALs or whatnot with all that cold water. I despise cold water, and I would I would not go in it voluntarily.
Hopefully no one is ever forcing you to do that. So
I will watch somebody go in there and shake while I drink my morning coffee in a warm blanket.
That's okay. That's what I would do probably. Pat, it was so cool to have you on the show. I mean, we could probably talk for ages about CrossFit, about programming, about whatever comes up in my mind. And there are a lot of things. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that we jam together soon, because I think there are so many topics which are so interesting that we have to talk about it. Your community is used to podcasting. My community is used to podcasting. So I think there are a lot of people who have a lot of value out of this episode. And yeah, it was great fun for me.
Thanks, man. Again, I really appreciate it. And yeah, it was a blast.
If you like this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify. See you next time.